All right. All right, David, I'm going to turn it over to you, let you do a short introduction of yourself and then get going.
Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. My name is David Quiroz. I attended Cal State San Bernardino, and I received my bachelor's degree in 2005 in sociology and social work. And in 2010, I received my MBA with concentration in marketing. My mom is not. So what I currently do, just to give you a little bit of background, I currently work for the County of San Bernardino, and I've been working for the county for about almost 23 years. It'll be 23 years in May. So in that time, I've primarily been in social services, either in service delivery or in executive leadership. I also spent a lot of time in many years in a personnel human resources capacity. So I've got a lot of experience just in terms of that and how that applies to a public entity. So that's a little bit about me. I know you might have seen some of that on the bio, but today's, like Kristen said, is going to be really mostly a discussion. I really like to get a feel for what people want to talk about or what they want to hear about, because in my experience, as a manager, as an executive, or just managing people in general, could be a lot different from that of what you're getting into. Everybody usually ends up in a different type of field, and I don't want to get too specific because of what that might mean, just specific to my particular positions that I've held. So if I keep it broad, that's why. The more broad I stay, the more applicable it may be to most of you. So again, I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate Cal State San Bernardino for always supporting its alumni, and we support you. So before we get started, I just wanted to kind of see, I have some ideas and some things I want to talk about, but I always like to ask what type of, specifically when it comes to managing people and managing, obviously during these difficult times that we've had with COVID and what have you, but managing and motivating people, what is it that you're most interested in? In other words, what are you most interested in conversing about? So if a couple of you want to unmute and just throw some things out, I'd love to hear it, just so we stay in the directions that you guys want to go.
How was it managing people remotely?
Okay, yeah. Remotely has always been a tough thing, right? It's been a tough thing managing people and supervising people more specifically during this pandemic. So cool, got that down.
I think motivation is a really big thing, especially like right now, and morale can be low, and it's hard with all of the changes going on still with all of the environment and the political environment and things like that. So motivating and keeping morale high, I feel, is something that's very hard to manage at this time.
Yeah, that's a fact. It is in most public sector work and in a lot of private sector work. It's hard as it is to motivate, right? To keep morale up. It's extremely hard to do that if you can't give constant raises and bonuses and what have you. In a pandemic and through telework, it's even harder. So anyone else?
David, I'll add, what skill sets are important for leaders of the future?
If anyone would like to add questions to the chat, I'll be happy to mention them as they come.
All right, well, that's a pretty good start. So, I think before we get into my little things, I did want to touch on some of the things that you guys just brought up. I think to start off, the remote managing has been it's been an excruciating challenge, to be honest with you. And you may hear me say things today that you may not hear other managers or executives talk about or say. Um, but it's important that I be honest with you. And with that is, you know, production is always the issue when you have a group of employees that are not in the workplace. When you're in the workplace, you have constant supervision, or theoretically you have constant supervision. But when people are teleworking, it's a lot different. And based upon what their job is, it's extremely hard to keep things in line, or keep people productive for 8 or 9 hours a day, whatever their schedule is. So what we've had to do is really change the way that supervision really thinks and views the way that their employees complete their job tasks. So, reframing what a supervisor has traditionally been, and then reframing their approach to their employees in a telework environment. And with that has really come a lot more onus on the employee to track and to analyze what they do each day, and how much time they spend on doing different tasks. Because if employees are working at a call center, or they're working in a system all day long, it's easy to track what their productivity is. But if they're doing other things, they're doing casework, or they're doing different aspects that don't necessarily have those things accompanied with it, it's very hard to make sure that people are staying on task, and that they're not not utilizing the time that they're being paid for. So it's really been a challenge to just kind of reframe supervision, what that is. It's a lot of coaching. It's a lot of one-on-one meetings with the supervision, with the managers, trying to get them to communicate more effectively. We were at a point in the workplace where everything was pretty much email. People stopped really communicating. They were hesitant to pick up the phone, and call down to someone, or even go to their office, or meet with them in their cubicle, meet with them in person. A lot of it was turning to email. So what this has done is it's really forced people to communicate in person, or by phone. So verbally, it's really forced supervisors and even coworkers with each other to relearn how to communicate effectively in person when there's an issue, or where there's a problem, or to come to a solution. So a lot of times, you guys have all done it. You guys have had an email come, and it doesn't make sense, or it's foggy, and you spend 6 or 7 emails back and forth trying to figure out what the person's trying to say, or what they want from you, or what needs to be done. So again, a lot of that has had to be relearned. And in a way, it's been a good thing, because communication is key. And that's really what it goes back to. I think communicating with staff, that are teleworking, communicating with supervision, management, communicating up and communicating down. I think that's really one of the most important things that any organization can focus on, is effective communication. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that later. But so remote managing has really just been about reframing the way that supervisors look at their employees, reframing the way that employees track their time, the way they view their job. The necessities. What are the necessities now? The necessities are a laptop and a cell phone, right? And a connection to the internet. So, everything has changed so much. So I think just remembering that, thinking about that, and again, the reframing of the way that the people look at each other in their roles is totally different. So that's been a challenge, but it's been something that we've been able to accomplish just through repetitive meeting, repetitive communication. Keeping morale high, that's another one that is very difficult. As I mentioned earlier, keeping morale high is hard as it is. But when you don't have, everybody's motivated by something different, but primarily most people are motivated by, hey, that's a job well done, or you did good, or just like some kind of encouragement or compliment from their superior, or I hate saying superior, but from the person that oversees them, or the management team. Even the smallest compliment like that does a lot sometimes. However, again, with the lack of communication, there's people that work for the department that I currently work for, that I haven't seen in months. You know, I haven't even seen them face to face in months. And these are people that I communicate with frequently. So it's been very hard to not only develop new ways, but also to get feedback. I think people are kind of to the point now where they want to telework, they want to do things differently, they want to use new technology, but with that comes a lack of that general the general principles that come with the subordinate superior dynamic. And again, I don't like using the word superior, but that's what we're referring to. So to be honest with you, the only motivation has really been, for us anyway, that we found to work, is that you can continue to work from home. I mean, really what we've had to say is, look, like if the productivity drops, if we can't if we can't service our clients, if we can't make sure that business is being taken care of as usual or to a high efficiency level, then we have to call everybody back and bring them into the workplace and take additional steps to get everybody back into the workplace. And what we found is that that's been a tremendous motivator for most people to continue to work really, really hard. And I know that sounds probably even cynical, but it's really just the basic truth. People really have learned how to be productive at home. So really that's been the largest motivating factor. A lot of them have been able to work from home. They haven't had to commute. Remember, my employer in particular, and many employers in the Inland Empire, they take people that commute well over 30 minutes each way. So not having to commute has been an incentive. Not being far from home if they have children, childcare issues, whatever the case may be, being at home has been a huge incentive for people to work hard. So, that's been one way we could motivate people, not necessarily by threatening them that they need to come back if they're not productive, but just reminding them and reinforcing them constantly that this is a good situation for everybody. And on top of that, obviously, it keeps them safe and it keeps them away from COVID, at least in theory. So, to be honest with you, again, supervisors, communicating with staff, being effective communicators with staff, and talking to them and just having those conversations about what at this point motivates people. That's really what it's been. And to be quite honest with you, we haven't had to do a whole lot other than that recently. The numbers have been up. I'm to my surprise, the efficiency of employees has either remained or even gone up in many cases. In a few cases, it's gone down as well, and that's to be expected. But those cases are individual, and there's so few that we can deal with them individually and bring people back if we needed to. So again, just that ability to be flexible, I think that's the new way of the future. I think that's the new model. I think that's what a lot of millennials in the workplace are looking for now moving forward. I think you're going to see a lot of people desiring to have the flexibility to work at their, kind of in their own space, is what I'm trying to say. So, Felix, thank you for your comment as well. I think the skill set for leaders of the future, the biggest thing I see is kind of the things that we've seen before. That we started to go away from, but really, to be honest with you, the ability to communicate effectively, and not just communicate effectively in person. You meet people that they communicate really well in person, or they communicate really well on email. They communicate really well over the phone. And now we have, Zoom. Not everybody presents the same way over Zoom or in person, over the phone and the email. So I think the ability to communicate effectively in every arena is really something that goes unnoticed. Like, I've gotten to the point now where if I'm attending a conference via WebEx or Zoom, or if I'm coming to this thing here, you can tell like when someone's having trouble communicating effectively to their audience, and it's noticeable now. Whereas before, if you had a Zoom call, it was kind of a unique thing. You go to it and you really couldn't pick up on stuff like that. But with so many Zooms and so many WebEx meetings and so many different things and presentations, you're beginning to see the separation between, who can communicate effectively and who can't. And not just to a crowd, but to the people that you support. You need to be able to manage effectively okay, so when people think of managers, right, or people think of supervisors or executives or in whatever profession, they think about being in that position and managing the people below them. Okay, managing down, as they say. So you have to be able to manage the operation, the people, everything that's going on. You have to be able to manage that effectively. That's your job. That's what you're getting paid to do. However, you also need to be able to manage up. And what I mean by that is there's so many things that have taught us at this point that with COVID, like everything is a moving target. Everything shifts so quickly that you have to be able to manage effectively upward as well. And what I mean by that is you need to be able to not only manage the people in the operations that you're responsible for below you, you need to be able to manage what's happening above you, the changes that are coming. You need to have foresight. You need to be able to anticipate things. If you see something wrong in the process or something that could potentially happen, it's up to you to start putting things together to see what would I do if this happens? If this occurs, what kind of ideas or what kind of creativity would I bring to the table to suggest to help solve, to minimize the impact on staff, first to implement the things that are needed for the highest efficiency. So again, being able to manage up is essential. So many times during this pandemic, the department director or whoever's come to the table has said, we have an issue. This has come down. This is what's happening. We need to shift gears. We need to get all of our staff, go in a certain direction. How are we going to do this? And the people that are prepared for that, the people that have prepared for that, those are the people that are successful. And just so I can tell you, it's become so like, this is just a skill of mine. You don't have to implement it or take it, or you can take it for what it is. One of the things I'm constantly doing, and I learned at a young age, was everything that happens, every decision I make or everything that's coming, I'm always thinking of what would I do if. So in other words, currently I have probably 100 employees that I'm responsible for. Let's just say 100 employees. It's probably a little bit less. I have 100 employees that I'm responsible for. A theoretical situation might be, what if the union calls for a walkout or something for some of the employees in certain bargaining units to get up and walk out or just not come to work for a week? What would I do? I've already thought of what kind of contingency plan I would do that. Now, we're not in any threat of that happening. That's not been talked about. It's not even close to happening. People want to come to work and their contracts are negotiated. But I've already thought about what I would do there. I already thought about what steps would I call? What would be next? What would I do first? Where would I try to tap into people that could potentially take these jobs? How would I get human resources to expedite the process to get people into their seats quicker? Like, I've already thought of all the ways that, like, if that were to happen, I already know what I would do. And it just becomes natural. If you do that with everyday thinking and everyday situations, if you kind of think of all the different outcomes that could happen and what you would do in that, when they come up, you've already thought it through. You've already thought about that. You're not surprised. You're not taken by surprise. You're not having to scramble to think of, what do I do now? So therefore you don't panic. You don't get anxious over it. You're almost preparing yourself for any possible situation that could come your way. And it doesn't just go for human resources and employees. It goes for, what am I going to do if my boss quits tomorrow? What am I going to do if my boss tells me I'm reassigned to another region? What am I going to do if my boss tells me that I'm no longer, assigned to the programs that I'm responsible for currently? What does that mean for me? So I'm just saying, in general, I've gotten to a point where every single day I'm thinking about what's happening in front of me, what leadership is doing, what my employees are doing, what everybody is doing. How would I react to some kind of dramatic change? And if you do that, if you get in the habit of doing that, nothing ever really takes you by surprise. And that's just something that I kind of just do automatically. I don't even think about it anymore. But anyway, so I think that's probably that, the ability to communicate, the ability to utilize technology, Felix. That's a huge one. Obviously, you have to be able to think forward. You have to be able to, like in the county right now, we're having a huge space crisis. So we've had to look at ways, technology wise, to maximize the space that we have, because we're having a hard time procuring additional space. So we're looking at different little things. We're looking at docking stations. We're looking at all these different things that include like upgraded and unique technologies. So me being able to see that, to understand that, to explain to other people that I report to how that works, what it means, what the budget for that is, what it looks like, what the long-term effects are, being able to communicate and look at technology the way it is and use it for your best advantage. I think that's just a natural thing that I think everyone in this room probably understands that already. But I would be remiss not to say and to, I guess, to reinforce that, because it is essential. But again, the biggest skill set has always been the best skill set: communication. You have to be able to communicate, and not just communicate, you know, in terms of an email, not just say, well, this is how we're doing things. But if you can communicate effectively, that's what I mean. When I say communicate, I mean communicate effectively. There's people that talk and there's people that communicate. And there's a huge difference, and you know it when you see it. So being able to talk to someone, to get right into it with them, to help them feel a part of the process. You know, if you can share information with people as to why something's changing, if you can communicate to people why something is the way it is, why their job is being effective, you can explain that to them and help them, you know, to try to explain why the change is necessary, how it may benefit them. You get a lot further with people than just saying we're changing it tomorrow and that's what it is. So being able to communicate effectively is key.
David, I have a question in the chat. The question is, during your college experience, I guess this could be undergrad or grad, what really helped you to develop strong leadership abilities and skills?
Through the college process, like just through the college process, not necessarily the workplace process. You know, the biggest thing that I would say, you know, everybody hates team or group projects, right? Everybody hates them. I mean, everybody feels really uncomfortable having to rely on other people for their grades. There's always, you know, there's always the person that doesn't pull their weight, or there's always the person that, you know, ends up having to do more than the next person. And for that reason, we don't like that. But I'll tell you what, man, you know, having to wait on others, you know, having to coordinate, having to, you know, explain things, having to do your part to pull your own weight, to have that anxiety in terms of, is this person going to pull through, or, you know, are we on the right track? What's my grade going to look? All of that really does prepare you for the workplace, because in everything that I do, I shouldn't say everything, the majority of what I do is dependent on other people. It's dependent on the success of other people. And it's really going to dictate whether my job is easy or whether my job is hard. You know, what other people do, what do they contribute, you know, what the outcomes are. So, you know, kind of trying to learn how to navigate that, how to be patient, which is not my best attribute, but learning to be patient with other people, learning to, you know, better coordinate, shift gears, be flexible. You know, those are things that really came into play during those times. And for some reason, I just felt like I had group projects, I feel like, in every single class. But anyways, that was really a contributing factor. And I think just prioritizing, you know, juggling your schedule, again, being flexible. That was a huge thing, because in my job and in most jobs, you just have to be able to shift gears quickly. You have to be able to reprioritize what's coming first, because your time management is a hugely underrated skill. Some people have it, some people don't, and some people can learn to be better at it, and some people can't. But learning how to be organized, how to organize your tasks, how to manage your time, and not only manage your time, but to get the most out of your time, was a critical skill. And again, all of those things have contributed and lent themselves to me in my career and the things that I do. So absolutely, you know, you don't think a lot about that stuff when you're going through it. Only as you reflect, you really do learn that those things help prepare you.
Thank you for that. So I've got another question for you. So during college, what was a good way to get out of your comfort zone and talk to people?
Well, that one's a difficult one for me, because I'm kind of a people person anyway. I definitely like to talk to people, almost to a fault. And I like to talk and communicate and just, be around people. I've always been that way. But I will say this, the part that was foreign to me, was going out of my way to communicate like with professors or like with other like faculty, staff members, things like that. I wasn't, I was always kind of intimidated to do that because I didn't know like what I was like, how I was supposed to approach them, or like how, like if I needed something from somebody, I would just kind of figure it out. If I didn't really feel like that dynamic was appropriate, I would try to figure it out on my own. But eventually you learn you have to communicate with your professors. You have to learn to communicate with your classmates. You have to learn to communicate with all the staff there at Cal State and everywhere. So I think, just really just out of necessity. I mean, I think at some point, it's hard to engage people, right? If you're not used to it, it's hard to engage people because you're afraid of several different things. And that's just human nature. Number one being rejection, right? That's just human nature. So it's really incumbent on the person. And this is just me talking. What I had to do is I had to mature. I had to basically just say, there's a need here that has to be met. Let me go ahead and just, do what I have to do. And that's really what it comes down to. When you start forcing yourself to do things that are uncomfortable, I know it sounds cliche, a lot of people say it, but when you force yourself to do the uncomfortable, like it really is a good feeling of accomplishment when you learn and again, you reflect and you realize like, there was no reason for me to feel that way. It was just, it could be your upbringing, it can be your personality, it could be the fact that you've been rejected before, you don't communicate effectively, you don't feel you communicate effectively. It could be a lot of different things. But the fact is that at some point you have to get over yourself. You have to just say, I need to be better at this. If you understand you need to be better at it, then you need to get better at it. And that's really the bottom line. No one's going to do it for you. And that's one of the underlying themes of every time I come back and I talk. Nobody owes you anything. I don't know if I used to feel like people owed me something, or like if, once I got my degrees, I was going to be, I was going to turn into this magical person that everybody was going to listen to and give all this respect to. And it's not like that at all. Nobody owes anybody anything. And if you think that people are going to, be knocking down your door for $150,000 jobs as soon as you graduate, you're in for a rude awakening. You have to go get that job. You have to figure out a way to build a foundation for your career and go get it. And it doesn't start with anybody but yourself. It's good to have connections. It's good to have the alumni, the alumni chapters, and then the support of the college and everyone else, and your family. It's good to have all of that. But in the end, sometimes there's only so much people can do. They can lead you to the water, but you have to drink. And that's really what it comes down to. So you really just have to force yourself to do it, is what I'm trying to say.
I'll just add to that if I may. So one of the things that we recommend for people new in our MBA program is to participate in a club. Just sign up with one club and just start attending. Get used to interacting, get used to networking with your peers. It's a safe environment to do that. And that can be a good way to learn outside the classroom, but also to really exercise those communication skills in a safe environment. So we do have another question. And so I will go ahead and let you know that. So it's from Maria, and she says, can you tell us about some common problems that you have seen new grads or people new to leadership positions have?
Yes. Well, there's two different things there. I think with new grads, I think the biggest thing, well, there's two things. One thing is not having enough experience in the field that you're going into. So therefore, not really knowing what you're getting into. It's important to intern. If you're going to, like, say, social work or something different, it's important to intern. You really have to get a good feel for what you're getting into, because nothing prepares you like experience. So, people can talk to you about it. You can read it what you want in books, but for new grads, I think really preparing yourself for what the job actually is. We see all these jobs on TV, these, advertising jobs, these management jobs, these executive type level jobs that you see on TV or you hear about, you have friends that do, that's what they do, but they're not all like that. So I think, being able to go into something with your eyes open, and if you don't have a lot of experience, or you don't have an internship in there, or you don't feel like exactly what it's going to be, give yourself time. Don't be hard on yourself. Again, be flexible, give yourself time to learn, and be able to roll with the punches, because you're not only dealing with a brand new job and learning that, you're also learning the office culture, the culture of the organization. You're also learning to deal with people. There's going to be people that don't like you or don't want to help you or help train you or give you the best information. There's all this different kind of thing, all kind of stuff that happens. So, with that in mind, you have to just be ready for that. The other thing is, I think that kind of falls in line with the other thing. I think, going to a new field, I think is really key to do your best to talk to as many people, to get to know as many people that have been in your shoes before, to learn what's ahead of you. I think there's just a big misconception that once you get a job, like everything's going to fall into place, and it's a lot of work. It's just a lot of work. For some people, it does fall into place, and for people like that go into jobs and they kind of figure it out, and you see they're fast tracking them. They know the right people. They get in with the right people. That's one thing. But for most of us, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of learning. Learning the organization, and not only taking your experience, but always looking at why something happens. I think that's the biggest thing. When you're in the workplace, the biggest favor you can do yourself, if something happens and it makes you kind of raise an eyebrow, if you have to say like, oh, I wonder why that's happening, or that was kind of out of left field, or that was out of nowhere, or I wonder why my boss said that, or I wonder why my boss did that. That's out of character. Always think of why. There's always a reason why. It may be a reason that's applicable to you. It may not. But the better you can get at always trying to connect the dots, have your mind constantly moving, the more you can do that, the more second nature it becomes, and the more you can better prepare yourself for what's about to come. Because if something raises your eyebrow in the workplace and it's out of character, it's out of left field, there's always a reason. Again, how that affects you, it may affect you, it may not, but again, it's good practice to just, my mind just does that already. As soon as something happens and I perk up, I'm already trying to connect the dots, and I'm trying to use the information that I have to be prepared for whatever might come my way.
David, what advice would you say to your younger self? What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh man. Again, be patient. I was guilty of the same thing, thinking that once I, got my degrees, that everything was just going to fall in line for me, and I was just going to be this big, Fortune 500 CEO. And it's good to dream, right? It's always good to dream, but it's also good to be patient with yourself. There were times when I reflect that I was not upset with myself, but that I was discouraged that my career wasn't moving along at the pace that I felt, for whatever reason, it needed to. As a young person, I had a huge chip on my shoulder, and I really used that to fuel me. And kind of as things go, you take them as they come. But once you get into the business world, or a world that somebody else thoroughly dictates to you, if you're not owning your own business, you have to answer to somebody, and those people have to answer to somebody as well, whether it's the public or whether it's a board of directors or whatever it is. Everybody answers to somebody, unless you own your own business, right? But even then, you answer to the IRS, right, or your customers, actually. But no, seriously, everybody answers to somebody. So you're at the mercy of other people, and that is a hard realization. You have to remember that when you're at the mercy of other people, you could have the best ideas, you could have the most creative thinking, you could have the solutions to every problem in your organization. But if you have a superior or management team or your director, or whoever it is, but if they're not aligned with what you think, or they don't trust you to implement that, or they don't have faith in you, or they're not listening to what you have to say, it does not matter. None of it matters. And that's a hard pill to swallow. So that goes in line with being patient. You have to be patient with yourself. You have to be patient with learning how to navigate the political environment. Every organization has a political environment that you have to get used to. The higher you go, the more political it gets. And that's just a fact. And some people like playing that and some people don't. But if you want to get ahead, sometimes you have to engage in some of that. And I know people, even people maybe in this room, that don't necessarily like to do that. But if you want to do that, you have to network. You have to get to know people. You have to engage people, and keep yourself working in a good light. And always make sure your work equity is pointing up.
David, how did earning an MBA help you in your career?
I feel like I always get that one. So quite basically, it actually, once I got my MBA, because I was in a social science or behavioral science, if you will, I had a sociology degree, right? And I was in supervision and management. But once I got my MBA, it actually opened up the door to go to more like administrative stuff. So I got the opportunity to manage the personnel division for the human services in the county, but it was a personnel division. So it took me in a direction where I could become more strong administratively, right? The stuff that it gives you, the MBA, the stuff that it gives you, it's very well-rounded. And that's really what you need. You need a totally different skill set to be a manager, if you're working in a department that issues people, cash aid, food stamps, Medi-Cal, things like that, you need a totally different skill set as a manager in that department versus being a manager in a personnel division or somewhere where there's constantly, moving parts. There's all these kind of different nuances that you have to learn, whereas that's more direct service and you have to just do A, B, and C to get the job done. So I think having a well-rounded education, the MBA, the degree gets you in the door, but the skill set that you gain from it, it helps you ascend. That's what helps you get noticed. That's what helps you be able to adapt to any particular circumstance that you find yourself in. Doing the MBA, courses and everything I went through with the MBA program, it really helped prepare me to take it to the next level. And, I don't mean to sound arrogant or big-headed, but when I look at some of my competition or in the past, people that I work with and different things like that, like I feel like there's a difference between me and them. And I think a lot of that goes back to what the MBA did. And I mean to say there's a difference for me in a good way. Like I feel like not only can I outwork them, but I've also got the tools in my toolbox to actually, be able to show that I can do the job better than anybody else.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any questions? I haven't got any in the chat in a minute, so please take advantage. Feel free to unmute yourself as well.
So I just wanted to, if I don't hear any, I'm sorry. I just wanted to go over a couple quick things that I wanted to make sure I say, just in relation to management. And any type of supervisor, management, anytime you get into a position where people depend on you or look for leadership, some of the key elements are being present. And I don't mean just being there at work and showing up to your job. I mean just being there for people to see you, for people to engage you, being available, even if it's by in this new age, if it's by Zoom or by the phone or by email, just being available, making sure that somewhere, somehow, people have access to you and that you're there. You're there for them to help them through their situations, to advise them, and to reinforce what your goals are with them. And then being authentic, obviously, most people can see through fake people. It doesn't take people long to figure out who's fake and who's real and who's just being themselves. You don't have, when I say be authentic, I don't mean you have to be anybody's friend or anything like that. I'm just saying you have to let yourself come through a little bit. You have to just be yourself. You can't be a robot. If that's your style of being a robot and going by the book and everything black and white, if that's your style, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but if that's your style, stick to it and just do that. Don't try to necessarily become something you're not if it doesn't fit you, if it doesn't feel comfortable to you. Now, that's contradictory to what I said earlier. Now, if you're gonna develop skills, that's one thing. But if you're trying to be something in the moment or a meeting or in an arena that you're not, I think people see through that quickly. But if those are skills you want to develop, work at it. Be honest with people. Dip your toe before diving all the way in. But that's something I wanted to say too. Just make sure you're authentic. I think people listen to you more. I think they follow you more. I think they admire you more, work harder for you if you're authentic and if you're available to them. And of course, following through. Following through is essential. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Like that just reinforces everything that you say to people. It just shows them that you're not just talk, you're really trying your best in your position. So yeah, so those are just some of the key elements I wanted to make sure I touched on, because I feel like sometimes they're said, sometimes they're not, but they're essential as far as I'm concerned.
I did have a question. I was asked, as a sociology major working in public service, what made you decide to go for the MBA over the MPA? And I think that could probably tie into a lot of different career choices, because there's a lot of different careers. And so why would an MBA be more beneficial to, as opposed to like an MPA or like an art person? Why would an MBA be more beneficial to them?
That's a great question. And sometimes I ask myself that all the time, but let me tell you. So when I was doing just quick story, when I was doing my undergraduate work, actually I was at a junior college before Cal State San Bernardino. And my major was sociology. And I knew, at that time I wanted to be in some kind of behavioral science or what have you, or social science. But so the reason was for that was I was really, really, really bad at math. Okay. And once I realized, so let me tell you, let me back up even further. I was taking Math 50, which I think is like 2 courses below the actual math that you have to pass in order to get your degree and to have it transferred to a Cal State. So algebra was never my thing. I couldn't do it. I just wasn't good at it. When I realized I could take statistics, I was like, okay, well, maybe that's something I could probably do. So I ended up doing statistics instead. It was hard as hell. And it took a lot of energy and a lot of work, but I was able to pass that. And I feel like I passed that a little bit easier because the concept was a little bit easier to me than algebra. So I took that math class and I thought, I'll never have to take another math class again. So I go to Cal State, I get my sociology degree, right, with a social work certificate, and I was a social worker. And I got into supervision. And that's where I got a taste of my assignment was in San Bernardino, but we shared a building just like we do now. We shared a building with our administration. So I was getting assigned a lot of administrative tasks, and I really started to see the value of affecting change on a more global level, on affecting change more massively than just one client at a time, which was very rewarding and very good. But I realized that I had a better skill set, and I realized too, the things I like and that I'm best at working with are ideas and people. And so I said, if I'm going to do that, that's not the MPA is really not for me, because I wanted to be flexible enough, because when you're in the public sector, it's really hard to bring all of your ideas to fruition. It's really hard to have a great idea and see it all the way through, because there's so much red tape. There's so many things that have to happen. Things have to go exactly right for you to get to that point. And at times you almost feel stifled. So that's a challenge. But at that time, again, I didn't know if I wanted to go into the private sector as well. So I wanted the flexibility that an MBA afforded me versus an MPA, which is really only applicable to public sector work. So I went into the MBA. I chose the MBA. I had no clue how difficult supply chain and accounting and finance would be. So there I was, happy for years that I had taken, statistics and finished my last math class ever, only to find out I had to do finance, accounting, and supply chain at a 600 level. But anyways, by the grace of God and by a lot of hard work and a lot of late nights, top of that, so I went there for the flexibility to be able to go in the private sector, right, and use my creativity and my ideas. Along the way, like I said, I feel like just having the well-rounded education, you know, it has allowed me to move and to promote and do other things within the county where I spent so many years before that because of the MBA. Whereas if I had just done my MSW or my master's in social work as I had planned, you know, I wouldn't have the same flexibility. If I had just done the MPA, I feel like I would have had some of the same flexibility, but my skill set would be totally different. It wouldn't be as developed as it has been since I got the MBA. And again, that just speaks to the well-rounded, you know, the well-rounded education that the MBA provides there at Cal State. So that's, yeah. So originally it was a matter of wanted to be flexible and go in the public sector or private sector possibly, and it turned into me being thankful that I went that route because of the skill set. Really, that's what happened. That's what ended up happening.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I haven't had any more questions. I don't know if Molly's received any more. So if you want to go ahead and we could finish up. If David, if you have anything more to share with us.
No, I appreciate everyone being here and giving your time. You know, like she said earlier, it's well encouraged to join a group. Get to developing your network now. As a board member for the Latino Alumni chapter, you know, I see a couple board members here as well, and our chair Felix Zuniga. They'll tell you the same thing. It's really important to develop your network. So many things in my life have helped me or have helped steer me in the right direction because of the network that I have. You know, but it's never too early to start developing that. I wish I'd have started developing mine a lot sooner in my college education. Thankfully for me, I got an opportunity to meet people like Felix and Mike Razzo, who's also here, and Mike Artiaga, and just other people, just a lot of different people that I was able to meet along the way. You meet someone, you converse with them, and then it's all about how can we help, you know, how can we help each other, and that's what it is. So that's what your network is. So the bigger your network, the more likelihood that you may get, you know, you may find what you're looking for. I guess that's the best way to put it. The bigger your network, the more chance you have of finding what you're actually looking for.
Awesome. If you don't mind, we did have one last minute question. So have you seen a competitive advantage or better return of investment for people who pursue a DBA? So continuing even after a master's degree?
You know, at my level, there aren't, and in my field, and Felix could probably, you know, speak a little bit better to this, but in my field within the public sector, I don't see a lot of those coming through. What I see is a lot of just master's level. Most people are at the master's level. They, you know, they're that's the most competition you'll usually see. And everybody puts their, you know, their alphabet soup behind their name, so you can usually tell what someone has or what they don't have. So the majority of what I see in my public sector organization is master's level. You do see some doctors, but again, that's because of the social science field that I'm currently, you know, an executive for. You see some of that. You see it in the behavioral health field, public health field. You see that part, but it indicates something different. But you know, we do have a doctor in the house, I believe, that could probably speak to that a little bit better than I could.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I was just saying in the chat, it really depends on what you want to do career-wise. If you're looking to do a DBA, I would think it'd be to teach at the faculty level. In the private sector or even working in higher education, it's valuable to get a doctorate degree if you want to advance into leadership roles. But that's ad specific, like higher education institution, but not less required nowadays. But it really depends on what your career path is.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I just want to make sure that we again thank David for your time. Felix, thank you for chiming in there at the end. We appreciate all of our alumni, faculty, staff, students that come and join us. And if you are an MBA student, please make sure to take a screenshot for your passport proof. This will be uploaded to YouTube within a few days. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everyone.